Hello friends, it's Kristie Marcotte. Today I'm sharing the cards I made using Pink & Main's June 2020 subscription box. The theme for the kit is Ocean Waves. I love the colors and designs in this kit, perfect for summertime. Pink & Main's monthly kits sell out every month. The only way to guarantee receiving a kit is to sign up and subscribe. I will add links in the description box for any kits remaining or any of the kit components that are available. Let's go ahead and get started with my first set of cards. I'm using a sketch from Mojo Monday. This is number 539. If you are interested in any of the sketches I show in this video, I do share all of that information on my coordinating blog post, and that link is provided in the description box. For this first card, I'm using this fun wave paper for the background, and then for that narrow strip I have a pattern paper with lighthouse, anchors, some little seagulls. Thought that would be a fun paper to feature. I'm using this light peach polka dot ribbon to go across the card, and just to add a little bit of stability, I'm adhering it to some white cardstock first. And then I'll just wrap those ends around the panel, adhere it to the back, and just to make sure they're going to stay in place, I'm going to put a piece of score tape on top. And then I'll add this to a cardstock layer. The kit does include several sheets of colored cardstock, but since I add so many layers to my cards, I always bring in extra cardstock. Now I'm going to work on the sentiment. I have a stitched circle die cut and also a scallop circle die cut. I have the sentiment already placed in my mini MISTI. Wanted to make sure to get a good stamped impression. So I will need to ink it up just a few times. And this is a fun sentiment. It's sometimes all you need is a good dose of vitamin C. And then using that same circle die cut and also one of Pink & Main's wave border dies, I cut out this fun sparkly water wave. And I just adhered that underneath the sentiment. I thought that matched nicely with the rest of the theme on the card. Now before I adhere it to the card, I'm going to add some foam dimension just in the areas where it goes off of those other layers. I like to keep things nice and even on the card. And I'll even use a thinner dimension on the left-hand side. So once I have the placement where I want everything, I'll just remove the backing on the foam tape. Add a little bit of liquid adhesive, and then I'll adhere that to my card. I had to move one more of the little foam tapes. I don't always get them placed correctly, and I don't notice until I place it on the card. Now using that same turquoise cardstock, I cut out a stitched banner die cut, trimmed off the top since it was a little too long. And then I'm going to add just a scrap of cardstock on the very upper area, again keeping everything nice and level on the card. And then just to finish off the card, I'm going to add some of the sequins that are included in the kit. These are super sparkly and they have a slight transparent look to them. And I'm just adhering those to the card using a couple different sizes of glue dots. I put a couple in the upper left-hand corner on the banner, and then I'll put 3 of them in the lower right-hand corner. And using this same sketch, I did make 2 cards. That's one of the reasons I love Pink & Main's kits. They include a full 6x6 paper pad, so you can easily make multiple cards. Now moving on to the next set of cards. This sketch is by MFT. It's number 494. I'm using the craft paper for the background, and then I also have this speckle looking embossing folder. Thought it looked a little bit like sand. And then I'll add this paper that looks like waves in the water, layer all of this with some of the teal cardstock, and I did cut out that large oval out of the background. Wanted to make sure I had enough of this specific color for all of my cards. So there is that oval, and then I also have this adorable crab paper. Thought I would feature that since it's really sweet. Before I adhere that oval, I am going to add some scrap cardstock on the upper and lower areas of that oval, simply because it goes off of that water paper in the center. Just going to add those small pieces, and then I can put ATG on the back of the full oval. Adhere that to my card. Add a couple little extra bits of ATG tape hanging over the edge, so I just tuck those in. And for the sentiment, I'm using one of the pattern papers that has a bunch of different borders. And this one had the sentiment vitamin C all across, so I cut out that strip and then trimmed it down so there's just two of the sentiments. It does get lost on that pattern paper, so I want to make sure it stands out. I'm using one of the glitter tapes from the kit, really pretty teal color. It's not quite wide enough to go behind this sentiment, so I am going to use two pieces of the tape. I'm just putting them right next to each other, trying to hide that seam. Trim off all of the extra. I just adhered it to some white cardstock so I had that stability. And then I'll just cut some fishtails on both ends, just matching that sentiment. Then I can use some liquid adhesive to glue this sentiment onto this glitter tape. I found that the only adhesive that really holds anything to glitter is liquid adhesive. And I'm using Art Glitter Glue. It works really nicely. It dries really quickly, although you do have a little bit of wiggle room to adjust things if needed. So just glue that right down following the sketch. And just to add a little extra detail, I cut out some small banners, one out of this peach cardstock and then the other out of the teal. Cut the teal one just slightly shorter, adhere those to the top of the card. And then I'll bring out the sequins and add a few of them to the card. I'll put two of them in the lower right hand corner and then just one above the left hand side of the sentiment. So there is my finished card, and I did make two using this sketch. Now moving on to the next set of cards. This sketch is by Mojo Monday. It's number 526. I have this fun cloud paper for the background and then a light tan polka dot paper for this smaller piece. I decided to round the corners on all of those. On that tan polka dot, I only needed to round that bottom left-hand corner since the other one's not going to be visible. I'm going to layer all of these pieces on that teal cardstock. You can see I have that oval cut out of the background again. I will be using that later. I'm going to add my card front to a card base. For the two banners included on the sketch, I used the teal cardstock for the longest one, and then for the shorter banner, I'm using that teal glitter tape. I'm adhering it to some cardstock since otherwise it won't have any stability at all. And then I'll cut the little banners. And then before I adhere those to the card, I will be adding those small scraps of cardstock just where it goes off of that polka dot paper. This is something that I do quite often. I don't like to have that visible dent or crease when the papers aren't all at the same level. And since there's always extra little bits of cardstock sitting around, this makes it really easy rather than using up foam dimension. So I'll adhere that long banner first and then glue down this shorter one. And now for the image on my card, I'm going to change that circle to an oval instead. And I use this darling octopus paper. I wanted to make sure to feature two of them on the front of the card. So that's why I switched to the oval rather than the circle. Just layered that in the teal cardstock. Adhere that to the front of my card. And I was trying to figure out where to put a sentiment and it just didn't look right. So I ended up putting it on the inside of the card instead. And this is fun. You've been occupying my mind. I also added a little strip of the pattern paper on the inside of the card just for that extra detail. And then to finish it off, I'm adding some of the enamel dots that are included in the kit. So there is my finished card, and I really like how this one turned out. So now moving on to the next set of cards. The sketch is by MFT. It's number 441. I pulled out the wavy stencil that's included in the kit, and then I have some light tan cardstock. So I'm just taping that piece in place. I'll make sure it's not going to move. I'm using the Gathered Twigs Distress Oxide ink and also Pink & Main's Ergonomic blender brush. I'm not really doing anything fancy. I'm just adding the ink to this paper, going for that very subtle look from the stencil. So go ahead and remove the paper from all of the stencil and tape. And then I'm going to use the extra ink that's on the blender brush and just fill in the rest of the areas. So it has a very soft look in the background. I selected the sailboat pattern paper for the background, and then I'm also using a small piece of this peach polka dot ribbon. Not very much is going to be visible, so I only cut these tiny little strips, and I'll just adhere that ribbon to the card using some score tape. I decided I wanted the ribbon to wrap around the cardstock, so I'll just adhere this pattern paper to that cardstock layer. Then I'll attach my ribbon. Put a little bit of ATG on the back, tuck those ends of the ribbon around, and then hold them in place with some more score tape. Now I can put my card front onto a card base before I add anything else to this card. And if I would have had the ribbon go between the pattern paper and the layered cardstock, it would have had a little more of a bump. So I thought it worked out nicer to have it behind the cardstock. I used some orange cardstock for the piece that goes behind this stenciled paper. Adhered both of those to the card, and now I'm going to add the sentiment. This is the die that's included in the kit. It has the words "thinking of you," and then it also has the outline. So this is very thin, very delicate. I use my tweezers to hold it, and then use my art glitter glue with the metal tip. Works really nicely to get those very tiny areas. And then I'll just add a little bit of pressure just to make sure all of the ends adhere. And I'm going to pop up this whole sentiment using some thin foam squares. These are made by Scrapbook Adhesive, and they're one of my favorites, since they're a little bit thinner than the standard Scotch foam tape. It also comes with two different sizes, so you have the larger square and then the little tiny ones, and they're easy to cut as well. I'll just adhere that to the front of my card, and then just to add a little extra interest, I'm using that glitter tape again. I love this color, it's so pretty. I just cut a little diagonal on the very end and then adhered it to my card. And then one final finishing touch, I'm going to add a couple of small heart die cuts. These were from one of Pink & Main's previous monthly kits. I just cut them out of some light blue cardstock, and then I'm going to pop up that smaller heart. So there is my finished card, and I did make two. And you can probably tell I didn't follow this sketch very closely. I really just used it for inspiration. So now moving on to the next set of cards. This sketch is from MFT. It's number 448. I'm featuring this beautiful shell paper for the background, and those 3 diagonal strips that are on the card, I'm using some more of this glitter tape. You can probably tell I really like this color since I keep using it. The kit actually includes a pink glitter tape as well, but I ended up only using the teal this time. I'll just save the pink glitter tape for another project. So once I have all of those in place, I just flip over the paper, trim off the extra. I decided not to wrap the ends around. I think it would have added a little too much of a bump there. So now I'm going to work on the sentiment and the image. I have a stitched circle die cut. I'm going to stamp out the sentiment. Sometimes all you need is a good dose of vitamin C, making sure to have it on the upper portion of this circle. And then I'm going to use a couple of the image stamps that are included. So I have a starfish. I'm going to add that one first, stamp it in some orange ink. Make sure to ink it a couple of times. And then I'll remove that and add one of the shells. And I'm going to stamp this in some teal ink. You can see I've already had a little bit of ink on there. The stamp set that's included in the kit has quite a few of beautiful images. I don't color images very often, so I decided to just use some colored ink instead. Go ahead and add this to the right hand side of my paper, having just a little bit of it hanging off the edge, and then I'll just trim that extra off. Adhere it to my cardstock, put my card front onto a card base, and then just one final finishing touch, I'm going to use some more of the enamel dots. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using this sketch. Now moving on to my next set of cards. This sketch is from OWH. It's number 250. I had to make a nice pink card since pink is my favorite color. I have the pink polka dot paper for the background, and then I used this anchor paper, has a teal in the background with pink anchors. I added that on a scallop circle die cut, put it flush to the right hand side, trimmed off the extra. And then I have some white and pink striped paper for the strip that goes across the card. So I'm following this sketch fairly closely. I'll add a couple of pieces of scrap cardstock to the left-hand side of this striped paper, just where it goes off of that circle die cut. Adhere it to my card, making sure that it's flush to the right-hand side. And now I'm going to start working on the image. So using that same octopus paper, I'm going to make just a little mini shaker. I used a circle die cut to cut out that octopus and also the acetate. And for the frame, I used Pink & Main's reverse scallop circle die cut. I'm adding some small pieces of score tape so I can adhere the acetate. Let's remove the backing. And then I'm going to use some liquid adhesive just to get the areas where I didn't put any score tape. I didn't want to just rely on the glue, so I think adding the score tape and the liquid adhesive will make sure it's going to stay in place. Now I'm using these thin foam strips from scrapbook.com. My friend Jen over at Scrapbana Creations showed these to me and I love them. This works out perfectly to go around those really thin areas when you want to do a shaker card or just add a little extra dimension. So if you remove the backing on both sides, they're really easy to manipulate around a curve. So once I have that ready, I'm just going to scoop in some of the sequins. I don't need very many since I don't want to cover up too much of the little octopus. I'll just seal that all in place, and I think it looks like little bubbles, so I thought that was really fun. Put some liquid adhesive on the back side and adhere it to my card front. And then I just put my acrylic block on top to let that glue dry. And for the sentiment, I did decide to use one of Pink & Main's sentiment stamp sets. This is called Just Because, and the sentiment is just saying hello. I also used the coordinating banner dies to cut that out. So just to glue it right down onto my card. And I decided to add a couple of banners in the upper right hand corner. So I have one cut out of that teal cardstock and the other out of the pink. Cut the pink one just slightly shorter and then layered them. And then I'll just add a few enamel dots to finish off the card. And for the second card, since I didn't have any more of the pink polka dot paper, I decided to use the green polka dot paper and then that rainbow wavy design. Now moving on to the final set of cards. This sketch is from Mojo Monday. It's number 528. For the background paper, I'm using the embossed cardstock that comes in the kit. And then I'm also using some of this lighthouse paper and some peach or orange polka dot paper. I'll just layer all of those pieces in some cardstock. And then I'm going to add some of the brown or tan polka dot ribbon to the top of the card. Put some score tape down first, and then I'll just wrap the ends of the ribbon behind, hold those in place with some more score tape. And I'll add my card front onto a card base. And for anyone that's interested in how big my matted layers are, I add an additional 1/8 of an inch for those cardstock layers. Now using the same ribbon, I'm going to tie a bow, and I'm trying to have more of the solid or the back side of the ribbon showing. I didn't want any extra polka dots, but I don't think there's a way to really tie the ribbon without having a little bit of the polka dot showing. So I am just kind of manipulating the back, the little tails, to make sure it's all the solid color. And then to make sure it's all going to stay in place, I'm going to add some score tape to the back sides. And I also attached the main part of the ribbon to the card using a small glue dot. But I think the score tape's going to secure it a little better. For the sentiment on my card, I've already gone ahead and stamped this out. And I used that same Pink and Main Just Because sentiment stamp set. So the sentiment this time is just for you. Cut a little fishtail on the left-hand side, layered it in some of this orange cardstock. I'm going to pop it up using some of the thin foam squares. I am following this sketch fairly closely this time, although I won't be adding the little heart behind the sentiment. Instead, I'm going to use some more of the sequins from the kit, attach those to my card using some small glue dots. I put a few of them in the left-hand corner and then a couple of them around the sentiment. I love the colors on this card. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using this sketch. Now here's just a quick recap of the 14 cards I made using Pink and Main's June 2020 subscription box. The theme is Ocean Waves, and this is a beautiful kit. I love this theme. I love the colors. This is perfect for summertime. If there are any kits still available, I will add a link in the description box. And sometimes Pink and Main does add some individual components from the kits as well. As always, the only way to guarantee receiving a kit is to subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.